Well, hello, folks. It's just the usual craziness. Um, when any big event happens, like the shooting that occurred recently of a prominent influencer or whatever, podcaster, whatever you want to call him, political influencer, I hesitate to use the name because it's such a flashpoint now. You know, people I follow, some of them talk about the left's reaction or the right's reaction, or Chris Hedges talking about, creating martyrs. And there's just a ton of content, coming out. A lot of conspiracy stuff. Everybody, it's clickbait. It's a big deal, so people are going to bank on it. You know, people are talking about the rifle and talking about the video and talking all these conspiracy theories. Did this state do it? Did that state do it? Black flags, whatever. Oh my God. It never ceases to happen this way. It's unsurprising, but it's unhelpful. Maybe at some point in the future, we'll understand exactly what happened. It could be simple. Uh, Maybe the young man did it, and that's that. Stochastic, radicalized violence, or maybe something else. But everybody's going to co opt it and use it for their own political purposes and for their own culture war purposes. So one side will say, oh, it's just, you know, they had to get rid of him because of this, that, or the other thing. And that gives us an excuse to do this, that, or the other thing. It's just so grotesque, the whole thing. Like I've said before, I don't like people like that guy. I don't agree with anything they say or the way they do things or what they think. I think the culture provides incentives for this kind of behavior, and it's all egged on, and it's all political, and it's all economic, and people are trying to fit in. Everybody's just co-opting this horror story to, you know, get an audience. One guy will go on the tube and say, you have to think that it's just a terrible thing and there's no excuse for it and it doesn't matter who the guy was or anything else. It's just, and then everybody wants to dox everybody and call everybody out. And they milk it for everything they can get out of it. And it's just disgusting, you know? Plus, this stuff happens every day. There's a state actor, a couple of them. One is this one, USA, that commit violence all the time, extrajudicial killings and assassinations. And their partner in the Middle East does it all the time for decades, generations. And they're proud of it.
Really depends on like the day, the mood of the commander.
So what would be the reaction from soldiers when they killed a civilian?
I think a lot of them really feel like they did something good. Because like I think the core of it, that in their mind, these people aren't innocent.
When people have been shot and killed, were they just left where they were?
Usually, yes.
They're assassinations. Of course, if the West does it or certain countries do it at a certain period of time, they're just killing bad guys or terrorists. Maybe on the other side, the people don't feel like they're terrorists. They're family men. They have children. They have a wife. It doesn't matter what they think if they believe this religion or that religion. They're just people. Planet Critical podcast, which I follow, I think it's good. And I've seen her grow over time. Uh, I've seen her be shocked when William Reese is explaining the predicament we're in, and she wants to be more hopeful, going to less hopeful. She learns from her guests and her experiences and her writing, which I appreciate. I like to see people grow. But anyway, she has quite a hefty title to her blog post on Substack, which I won't repeat because it'll just light the fuse, it'll just trigger everybody. But basically, the idea there is what I was thinking about all along, which is, we've just been lighting fires, igniting conflict and wars all along, and watching people die on the tubes and the social media platforms for years, and it's nothing. We don't get outraged every time there's a headshot of a child. A sniper is like practicing their marksmanship. There's no outrage there. There's just so many failures, and it's this selective outrage. A famous guy gets murdered, and suddenly everybody's morally outraged or posturing one way or another. I don't care what side you're on or what you think about it. It's a kind of performative moralizing self-righteousness, or just using the event to bolster your own culture war opinions or your religious opinions or whatever it is. Metatron is so outraged that anybody would voice their dislike of the individual post getting murdered. But it's just a fact of life. There are some despicable people out there who fuel the fire, so I put on my Substack all the stuff from the Bible and the New Testament about reaping and sowing. You reap what you sow type of thing. It's no excuse for violence, but it's just a fact. I mean, there's cause and effect. People do things and something happens. So in my opinion, there were lots of things going on to increase the likelihood of a war in Ukraine. People meddling, and as they do. And of course, now we have it, and there's no end in sight. There's just no desire for it to stop. It's madness. And what's going on in the Middle East is just insanity. And there's no moral outrage from the New York Times or from anybody, really. But everybody who is upset about these events, one way or another, regardless of what side you're on, they're going to just use it to voice their own biased concerns and fuel the culture wars. I mean, guys go on and they talk about how easy it is to make the shot, or how difficult it is to make the shot, or how hard it is to assemble and disassemble a rifle, and who's really behind it, and who radicalized the guy, and where they're the signals, all this stuff. So people are picking it apart. They're going to get a lot of traction online talking about this, and it's going to go on for weeks, and then something else will happen equally outrageous, and we'll move on to that story, and we'll do the same thing. because none of us really want to do the work required to address the causes of our problems and predicaments and social unrest and culture wars and all that. We just can't do it. Not at this scale. I don't think civilization at this scale can do anything, especially modern techno-industrial, financialized, capitalist culture. So it's just going to continue until it burns itself out at some point. In the meantime, people are just going to make hay with all of this nonsense until they can't anymore. And it's tragic. So basically, what Rachel Donald was talking about was there's tons and tons of research, lots of books. This new book, Goliath, what is it? It's a good book. Luke Kemp, Goliath's Curse. Anyway, there's a lot of reference in that book about how human beings are cooperative creatures. This is how we survived. But at a certain scale, when we hit a certain civilizational scale, that flips. I've talked about that before, so I won't go into it. But a lot of traditional small-scale cultures, if somebody's out of whack, if somebody's behaving badly all the time, they get blackballed, exiled, ostracized, kicked out of the group, sometimes killed. It happens all the time. Somebody's bullying you, or you're having a feud with your neighbor and the other across the other valley or something, and you can't take it anymore, and it just turns into a violent conflict.
Why did some U.S. soldiers try to kill their own officers? During the Vietnam War, some troops turned on their commanders, a brutal act known as fragging. It often involved tossing grenades in tents at night, targeting officers blamed for reckless orders. From 1969 to 1972, nearly 900 cases were reported, with dozens killed. Many soldiers were draftees, disillusioned with the war, and saw their leaders as careless with lives. Some say this growing rebellion helped push the military to end the draft for good.
Confrontation. And sometimes that's baked into the culture. We don't put up with people like this. But of course, in our civilization, we have rule of law, the rule of law, criminal codes, and so on and so forth. And we have punishments for behaving badly. I think there's capital punishment in Utah, so if it turns out that this particular individual was the shooter, the murderer, he could get the death sentence. Other places don't have that, but this is how we deal with it at scale. It's pretty necessary to have law, you know? But at smaller scales, people can just say, we don't put up with this stuff. If you behave badly, whatever that behavior is, you get booted out. But in our culture, a lot of bad behavior just seems to be incentivized on all sides. So Rachel talks about the left. I don't know what she means by that, because there's a plurality of views from different groups and individuals on the left, left of center, however you want to define that, progressive or whatever. It's not a monolith. Everybody doesn't have the same opinion about what happened. And it's the same on the right and the center. But of course, the zeitgeist is powerful, and people will fall into little groups and that appeal to them and take very extreme and passionate positions on the thing. And it's just a waste of time, and people just get more and more wound up. And I do think that you run the risk in the United States and elsewhere of inviting the violence to explode, because fascism could come back to Europe when Europe fails, and it's failing. The our economic system is unsustainable for many material reasons and physics reasons and biological reasons. There's tons of reasons why it's not going to last. And once it gets really, really rough, just look at history. I mean, bad things happen. The Europe could rearm itself and then wind up, you know, warring between ethno-states, European ethno-states, you know. It's very much easier to point east and say the Slavs, look, they're different. How different are they really? And how many different ethnic groups are Russian nationals? There's so many, right? And how cosmopolitan is Europe? And Nicholas Nassim Taleb put out another thing. He's all focused on his little tiny world, but he pointed out that, you know, we have to import poor people because we can't afford to pay people a living wage, a wage that would incentivize them to do certain jobs. So the whole immigrant thing is a red herring. It's just nonsense. It's a opportunistic political trope that populists use to get a following because people don't know how to think things through very well. And that's unfortunate. What kind of government wants its constituencies to be highly educated and highly evolved in their thinking and very, very motivated to be involved in their democracy, engaged, you know? They're much happier if they can have blocks of people who really don't know what's going on and just appeal to their emotions, which is unfortunate. So, you know, a decent democracy at scale, you need a lot of really smart people who pay attention and who participate at all levels from the grassroots to the local, to the state, to the federal, whatever levels there are. And that has to be incentivized and encouraged. And then you'd have to be realistic about what you can do and what you can't do, what, you know, how much you can borrow and get away with it, because you're borrowing on future energy and materials. And unfortunately, we live in a world with limited resources, so that can't last forever. Of course, you can play the game right now and get away with murder, which is what we're doing. We're destroying so much, but we don't pay attention to it till it's, you know, some famous person. And then it's a big outrage and everybody has to take sides. And you hear the conservatives whining, some conservatives, about how they're victims. You know, they're just treated so badly, and people call them out on this, that, and the other thing. Call them misogynists or call them racists or something. And how dare they? Oh my God, you know, you just broke my heart. I was called something on Facebook today just because I posted an AI picture of me in the Roman Senate. So now I'm a misogynist manosphere guy because I posted that picture. I'm just going to assume that that's the way you think because you posted that picture. I posted it because I had a nickname in Hong Kong. They called me Senator. So I don't know where that came from, but it has to do with my last name anyway. So, you know, people make assumptions based on not even looking very carefully into who you are, or what you post, or anything. You scroll down the thing, I don't think you're going to find manosphere on my Facebook. I don't have pictures of my guns and stuff, and you know. But anyway, everybody's taking this as an opportunity to either whine or point the finger or talk about how we're in a civil war. And that rhetoric is going to eventually, well, you reap what you sow. you put that out there enough, you keep talking about it in those terms, and eventually things will explode. Especially since we're going to go through a very rough economic patch, and we have the poly crisis to deal with, and these aren't going away. They're for real. They're real problems, and we're not addressing them at all. We're not looking at the causes of anything. We're just looking at the symptoms, and we're looking at the culture wars, and it's just absurd. And so people are going to be in a rough place, and they're going to be more prone to acting out. And it's odd because if the young man was the perpetrator, I think, as far as I know, it's likely he is, but he's just a young man, so impressionable and so easily radicalized, and it could catch on, you know. We had a CEO gunned down, and now we have this famous political influencer gunned down. And it doesn't seem there's any end in sight. On the same day that the influencer was shot, there was a school shooting. So there's that. That's not going anywhere. And there'll be another one next week. And nobody's looking at the reasons why. They're still talking about Venezuela and fighting the drugs and the war on drugs. That was always a sham from the very beginning, from Reagan era period. And now that's the excuse, the Gulf of Tonkin, to go to war with Venezuela to get their oil and resources. So Venezuela's gearing up. All the people are saying, look, we're going to be a militia. We're going to defend our country and all this stuff. And
again by any empire, whoever it is.
A place of strong symbolism, where the leader of the Bolivarian Revolution, Hugo Chavez, rests. Many people passed by here today, swearing with their lives to defend their country's sovereignty.
Inicialmente no tiene un reclutamiento.
In principle, enlistment is not mandatory. It is not an obligation for young people to go to the barracks to be trained as military personnel. However, the Constitution says that it's the obligation of all Venezuelans to defend their territory and their sovereignty, and you don't have to be in the military to do it.
Tienen que ser militares solamente lo que
A clear demonstration of the country's national unity in the face of any threat of interference in its democratic process.
Here is the evidence. There is no obligation to anybody. We all have a sense of belonging. We are nationalists. We believe in peace. And we know that Nicolas Maduro has developed a diplomatic system for peace, and we are responding by complying with his call without any obligation.
If the illegal economic sanctions applied against Venezuela were...
Well, good luck with your white ethno-state or whatever ethno-state you have. We live in a global world with global supply chains, and you need labor and whatnot. And yes, it's true that in the North, the birth rate is falling. And it's going to fall anyway, one way or another, because eventually climate change is going to starve a lot of people to death, and which is tragic also. But like Rachel Donald said, why do we think that we're so much more valuable than anything else in the world? One person's life is so important compared to what? You know, ecocide, genocide, all this kind of stuff. I mean, I don't think we think about things proportionally or caringly enough. And that gets us in trouble. So, I don't know. Talk about this, and I don't even know if I'm making the point I wanted to make, but I wish people would read more, study in depth more, read some books and do book reports for themselves on the book. Try to understand the causes of the problems we're facing, And then recognize that you and yours and most of the people you know and work with are peaceful, loving, caring individuals who live in a collective, who participate in a community all the time. Unfortunately, a lot of those communities are economically incentivized communities, like I have friends at work or something like that. But that's the way it's going to be for a long time until this whole civilization burns itself out, literally burns itself out. And someday that's going to happen. But in the meantime, we're in for a rough patch. So we should start to figure out how we're going to disengage from this stuff. Like, I did appreciate what the governor of Utah said about social media being problematic, a cancer, and maybe we should unplug. I think if you don't know how to think carefully and aren't open-minded and open-hearted and intelligent in the way you consume information, it can be a very bad waste of time and very deleterious to your health and thinking and all of it. It can be very nasty. So anyway, take care, and God, let's just not consume endless information about this incident and incentivize all the YouTubers and the Rumble people and everybody, all the bloggers, to write incessantly about it from their own, political perspective, just until the next thing happens. We've got too much outrage. Even though things are outrageous, mind you, and you reap what you sow, so think about it, okay? All right, take care. William T. Out.